What is up, horror movie fans? Row Show Movie Reviews. Today I'm going to be giving you my review and breakdown of Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. And this will wrap up my videos for the original 8 from Paramount. I may look to get into doing parts 9 through 12, maybe here in the near future, maybe, further down the road, but at least wanted to give you a breakdown of my opinion of the first 8, the original series, which is my favorite. I'm not a huge fan of parts 9 through 12. I think that's really, when New Line Cinema got involved is where things really, kind of took a nosedive, and the series kind of went in the shitter, and whether it's because New Line didn't understand the character and didn't understand what Friday the 13th was, whether it was they didn't care, whether it was they were cheap or whatever, it just really, to me, really fell off. So as always with all of my videos, if you haven't seen this movie, I encourage you to go watch it before watching my review. And the reason is simple. I just, this reviews and breakdown are going to have spoilers, and I don't want to, ruin anything for you, the moviegoer, if you haven't seen this movie ahead of time. So if you haven't seen it, my suggestion is to go watch that and come back if you choose to do so. If you have seen the movie, let's get into, the breakdown, the storyline, my opinion of this movie, kind of where I have this movie rated, in the original 8 in the series, this movie, obviously, part 4 was called The Final Chapter, and really, Paramount, they originally wanted to do just one. This wasn't meant to be a series. It wasn't meant to be, this gigantic thing that it grew into. Friday the 13th was supposed to be a one-off. The popularity kind of changed everybody's mind, and, there was a part 2, and then the same thing kind of happened with 3 and then 4, and then they were kind of looking to get away from Jason, get out of the business. So, they said, part 4, let's call it The Final Chapter. Let's kill Jason. Let's, kill the series and kind of move on. Obviously, they came to their senses when, these movies weren't costing them a lot of money to make, but they were making, most of the time, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 times, the amount of money that it costs to make them. So, obviously, if you get a return like that, you're going to keep wanting to, make those movies because it's easy money, it's good money. And so that's sort of what happened here. They said, kind of come up with an idea. Frank Mancuso Jr. Had, a director for this movie that had a history or a background in directing pornographic films. So that was kind of different and unique. And you can sort of tell there's certain elements in this movie where I think that as far as the series goes, at least the first 8 movies, this one really had probably the cheapest feel to it. And I don't mean cheap just as far as like the budget, just cheap in the fact that it felt like there was, a lot of TNA and sex scenes and stuff that, were just in there to be there. Like it was just thrown in there. It wasn't like something that just kind of led up to it and was done in kind of a natural way. It just kind of feels a little bit different. And if you've seen the movie, you kind of know what I'm saying. There are some stories from behind the scenes where, actors were, getting it on in the woods, Deborah Voorhees being one of them. And, the director was yelling, yeah, F her, come on, F her more, F her harder. And, it just kind of creates a weird dynamic for people on set and for people that are working on the movie when you have someone kind of yelling that. But, what really honestly is to be expected when, you hire a director with that kind of a background. This movie, does not take place at Camp Crystal Lake. Other than, Jason X, it's the one that really, in the series that doesn't. I know like Friday the 13th Part 8, only has probably the first 8 to 10 minutes of the movie that take place in Crystal Lake, and then it's kind of, takes place, in the sea and in New York and whatnot. But this is really, along with Jason X, the one that film in the series that doesn't take place in Crystal Lake. It takes place at sort of like a mental institution / halfway house for kids who are kind of messed up or orphans or, have bad backgrounds and things of that nature. Tommy Jarvis is years older from when he killed Jason Voorhees in part 4. He goes to this place where, he's supposed to kind of get therapy and try and work through some of the things of the past, some of the mental and physical things that, the toll that killing Jason and having Jason kill his family and friends kind of had on him. There are a lot of kids, in this like halfway house along with him. There's a kid there that has, eaten a bunch of chocolate bars and all that kind of stuff. And, he puts a candy bar down on this log this guy named Vic is chopping, and, he gets mad because he doesn't want to eat it, and he chops the candy bar, and so he yells at him, and then, next thing you know, axe in the back, and he gets chopped up into pieces, and, the coroner comes and all that kind of stuff, and they kind of for a minute make you think like maybe he could be the killer, or he could have something, to do with it, and then, come to find out, Tommy Jarvis is having what we think or maybe feel could be hallucinations of Jason Voorhees in his room, out, in the kind of yard when he's looking out the window, and we can't tell if they're real, if they're not. And then all of a sudden an imposter Jason or who we think could be Jason Voorhees shows up and starts killing people around this, in the area around this halfway house. And obviously Tommy has to, pull himself together and try and, fight back and maybe possibly try and do what he tried to do in part 4, and that's kill Jason Voorhees. As with all the movies in this series, it has a plethora of characters with different backgrounds. It has the horny couple. It has, the punk rocker chick named Violet, who's my favorite character in the movie. I think she's so rad. It's got Reggie the Reckless in it. So there's a lot of really, likable characters in this movie. I think the one knock, obviously, that people have on this movie is that it's not Jason Voorhees, right? It's an imposter killer, and therefore a lot of people, knock it for that reason because it's not Jason Voorhees. My personal opinion on that is it doesn't really bother me. It's never really bothered me. It's not one of those things that, like, over the years I've just, grown to accept or been like, it's not a big deal. It's never really bothered me. I've always looked at it for what it is. It's a different take. It's a different spin. I mean, Friday the 13th Part 2 is just basically Friday the 13th Part 1, right? It's the same movie, right? Friday the 13th Part 4 is basically Friday the 13th Part 3. It's the same movie. And Part 2 and 4 get, a lot of hype from fans. A lot of people say that, they're in the top, 3 or 4 movies in the series. Most people think it's either Part 6 or Part 4 that is the best in the series. And, I like them, but again, I just see them as a copycat movie of the movie before them. 2 is Part 1, and Part 4 is Part 3, right? Part 5, like Part 3. Part 3 was a little bit different, obviously, than Part 2. We get more of an established, vicious, mean Jason, so it was a little bit different. Part 5 is completely different than any of the previous movies. They went in a creative, different direction, and in some instances people get mad at that, but I kind of like that they did something a little bit different. It was a different location, it was a different killer. You didn't know who it was, and that's kind of what I appreciate about this movie. Obviously, Part 6 is different than any of the movies because it's zombie Jason. Part 7 was different than any other movie because it had a telekinetic rival for Jason. Part 8 was different because, they took it out of Camp Crystal Lake and took it in New York and did something, completely, off the wall with it. So there are a lot of movies in this series, like Part 5, that do different things, that try different things, that have a different script, that, try and take a little bit of a risk. And, for me, it doesn't really bother me. I like this movie. Where would I put it in you know, kind of the top, or the original 8 in the series, I'd probably put it towards the end, you know, 7, 8. I don't, but again, that just because it's at 7 or 8 doesn't mean it's a far less movie, or, you know, a far worse movie than a movie that I would have in 5th place or whatever. You know, the difference between some of these movies is just so minuscule to me. It really just depends on what kind of mood I'm in, what kind of story I want to see, what kind of cast I'm in the mood to see, what, you know, version of Jason Voorhees I'm willing, you know, that I want to see. And that's just kind of how this whole series is for me. It's not like just because a movie's here that I necessarily think it's shit, and this one is just so much better. I would say that with the, you know, parts 9 through 12, I think they're all garbage. But, you know, yeah, this is a decent movie. They try something different. At the end, we find out that it's Roy, the paramedic in town, and his son is the kid that gets chopped up in the beginning of the movie. How, you know, he maybe didn't know he was there or knew he was there, or how people didn't know that was his kid, you know, in this kind of community. I don't know. But, you know, that's what it ends up being. And, you know, at the end, he gets knocked off, you know, the top of the barn and falls on this farm equipment. He gets all these spikes in him and whatnot. And then his mask is, like, ripped open and you can see his face underneath. And we find out that it's Roy. And then at the end, Tommy Jarvis is in the hospital, and Pam, who's one of the ladies who, you know, runs the mental institution or whatever that he's staying at, comes to see him, and he's like hiding behind the door, and he has, you know, the Jason mask on. So what that, you know, says to me, and what that says to a lot of fans, is that it was maybe set up for Tommy Jarvis to kind of take over for Jason. And, you know, why that didn't happen, why they went in a different direction with part 6, you know, you're going to have to ask, you know, Frank Mancuso Jr. There might be something about it on that Crystal Lake Memories. I can't remember if there is or not, but I'm sure they go over, you know, why they kind of went in a different direction. But overall, this is not a bad movie. It's not as bad as some people say it is. Again, it doesn't bother me that it's not actually Jason Voorhees. It doesn't bother me that it's an imposter killer. They obviously went in a different direction. It's called A New Beginning for a reason. It's not the same old recycled thing or recycled story. So, yeah, I enjoy this movie. If it's on, I'll watch it. You know, occasionally will pop it in and watch it. So it's not like I hate the movie. It's just, you know, obviously not my favorite in the series. So that's my review. That's my take on this movie. Let me know what you think in the section below. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Subscribe to the channel if you want to. Share the video if you feel like it. And until next time, I'm out of here.